Hi, I'm Olajide Paris for MakeCinematicMusic.com, and today I'm going to talk about what computer you should use for composing, or what computer you should look at for composing if you are a new composer. Well, this same logic also goes for veteran composers as well. Let's first start off with Mac versus PC. I'll talk about the benefits of the Mac, then I'll go into the benefits of a PC. So with a Mac, the benefits are plug and play, meaning you buy it from the Mac store or wherever you buy the computer, you plug it in and it works. There's very little to be done in terms of configuration, and therefore it's very too easy to use. There's very little that you actually need to learn about the Mac operating system in order to use the computer. Unlike Windows, where there's a lot of things you're going to need to learn, especially if you're going to be a power user and be a composer. The third benefit of using a Mac as a composer is the stability. Unlike Windows, Macs don't tend to get as many blue screens of deaths, which we would call a kernel panic. Obviously, there's the beach ball of doom, as some people call it, but generally speaking, once you're up and running on a Mac, you're going to have a lot of uptime and not randomly have something stop working the way you often will on PC in the fullness of time. Not often on a daily basis, not necessarily. The last benefit of a Mac is that Macs tend to have a very high resale value. And a really good example of that is that there are people now still using their 2010 and 2012 Mac Pros. I'm making this video in 2021. And getting really great value from them. And if they wanted to, they could still sell them today for at least a few $100s. And the case isn't just the same with PCs. You don't see people using 10-year-old PCs, and you don't really see them selling them unless they're, in the IT side of things, like servers and things like that. Now, what are the benefits of a PC if you're a composer? The first benefit is that PCs are infinitely configurable. Every part and every component of a PC, from the motherboard and to the case, is completely user configurable, and therefore also you can just choose any kind of configuration that you need. Whereas when you get a Mac, you get whatever configuration Apple has created for you, or the range of configurations that they've allowed you to choose from. PCs, in terms of power for power, tend to be more affordable than Macs. That's another reason to look at them. And the parts are user replaceable, meaning if a component goes bad on your PC, as long as you know what the component is, you can buy a new one and you can replace it, which is super handy and becoming less and less the case on these new modern Macs. PCs are also user upgradable. And that's great because that means you can start out at whatever budget you want. And if you plan your build the right way, you can build it to be configured with whatever budget you have in mind. And then you can later on upgrade individual components as you get more money or your needs expand. The last thing that's great about PCs, and this is kind of an odd one, is compatibility. What I mean by that is that in the Mac world, we get a new operating system every year from Apple. And that can sometimes mean anywhere from 3 at the minimum to 6 months or more for the developers that make our DAWs and our plugins to catch up and make sure that all of their software is compatible on Mac OS. And how long it takes for them to catch up depends on the complexity of the updates and the upgrades that Apple have made on their side. So what that means is that every year, Apple's pushing out a new update to their Mac OS, or a new version actually of their Mac OS. And there's a period of time where everybody online will say, is it safe to update? Is it safe to update? The answer is no. The answer is always no. When there's a new version of Mac OS, you never want to update. Whereas on the PC side of things with Windows, the fundamental paradigm of Windows 10 or Windows 11 doesn't change. Of course, there are updates that are rolled out over a long period of time, but because they come over a long period of time, the fundamental makeup of what makes Windows Windows doesn't change. It's just these little security and bug fixes, and very rarely is it major feature changes that mean that developers have to recode their software completely. So compatibility and knowing that the paradigm of the operating system is going to stay reasonably stable is a real big benefit of a Windows computer. Now, what do the different components of a computer mean for you as a composer, and what do you want to look at? Well, first of all, what does a CPU do? The CPU is obviously the main brain of a computer. For a composer, more CPU power translates directly to more instances of plugins, more polyphony, meaning more voices of virtual instruments that you can play back, and faster bounces, meaning anytime you're going to bounce down or mix down your audio, your project to audio, the faster the single thread performance, the faster your bounces are going to be. My recommendations are, if you're going to get a laptop, that you're going to look at something with 6 or more cores. You can get machines that are laptops up to 10 or 12 or more cores, but there is a point of diminishing returns because of the amount of heat that's generated by higher end processors, and in a laptop we have such small enclosure to dissipate the heat. So make sure that you account for that. And even in those cases where a laptop can take advantage of all of that power, they're going to be loud, which is not great for composers because we want to have quiet and cool machines that we can work with. Now, if you're going the desktop route, then get as many cores as you can possibly afford. I would say the minimum would be 8. There's no reason not to get 8 unless you go for a lower end PC build, but make sure that you have a socket that can be upgradable with a CPU later on to more cores. But on the desktop side of things, you can go crazy. You can go 8, 10, 12, 16, all the way up to 28 cores or more if you get a server CPU, which I don't recommend, by the way. Now, the next component that you look at when you're buying a computer as a composer is the RAM. And the RAM translates to the amount of virtual instruments that can be loaded. So more RAM means more virtual instruments. I recommend 32 gigabytes or more. 16 gigabytes is not enough, and I will tell you why. When you turn your computer on, you're going to have your operating system taking some memory, usually around 5 gigabytes or so. And then you'll turn on your DAW, whether that's Logic or Cubase or Pro Tools or whatever it is anyway. And that's going to be probably another 3 to 4 gigabytes. So we have 5 from the operating system, 4 from the DAW, and that's already 9 gigabytes of 16 taken, only leaving you 7 gigabytes for virtual instruments. So you would quickly run out of that very fast, and you don't really want to be pressing against the upper limits of what your computer can do. So 32 gigabytes of more of RAM for your CPU. Lastly, storage. How much storage do you want and what kind? Well, you need a drive for your operating system, and on your operating system, you want to load only the operating system, your DAW, and the programs that you're going to use for music, whether that's Contact or whatever. But the sample libraries themselves, you want to put onto another drive. In terms of size, first of all, always SSD, and you want anywhere from 256 gigabytes of hard drive to a terabyte of SSD. For samples, always preferably NVMe. If you can't afford NVMe, go for something SATA based. If you don't know what that means, look it up or check out my guide. And I would recommend a minimum of 1 terabyte for samples, even if you don't have enough samples to fill that up. First of all, you don't want to fill up your drive. I talk about that in my guide in a moment. But you can always add more SSD as you get more sample libraries, so don't worry about that. So that's the basics of what you need to look at when you're buying a computer as a composer. For a deeper dive into this, download my free composer's guide at makecinematicmusic.com. And in that guide, I give you a rundown of all of the gear that you need as a composer to get started. Everything from computers to headphones and speakers, DAWs, all at multiple price points. I give my recommendations at different price points, and I tell you why I recommend them. And on the computer side of things, there's even specific builds, whether you're going to go the Mac route or the PC route, and you can compare and make a decision based on that. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.